Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Coral Reef Ball Python. It's a pretty rare combination of genes. I actually went over to morphmarket.com, and out of the 250,000 plus ball pythons over there, they actually only had about 24 Coral Reef combinations, which is pretty surprising. It's a pretty simple combination. It only consists of the Coral Glow and the GHI, and the Coral Glow is really visually dominant. When you work other genes into the Coral Glow has a really strong influence of keeping the Coral Glow kind of an orange color that really dominates a lot of your combinations. But if you actually work GHI into the Coral Glow, it actually darkens the Coral Glow and you get some pretty interesting combinations. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the potential of the Coral Reef Ball Python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is a Coral Glow, and a lot of people think that the Coral Glow is really similar to the banana. Some people think that the Coral Glow and the banana are exactly the same gene, although I have seen some people that are convinced that the bananas are different than the Coral Glow. As a matter of fact, I was selling snakes at one of our local reptile shows and I had some Coral Glows in my display, and right next to me there's a table. Usually they don't do this, putting ball python tables right next to each other in a show, and the guy right next to me actually had some bananas, and I was looking at his bananas, he was looking at my Coral Glows, and we could definitely tell that there was a pretty big difference between the bananas and the Coral Glows as far as the visual appearance. The color and the contrast was different, although you'll see some variations within each gene, and I'm convinced that the bananas and the Coral Glows are pretty much exactly the same. The both genes are actually the only genes that are sex-linked genes. So if you actually take a Coral Glow male maker and you breed it to something else, all the Coral Glow offspring come out as males. You won't get any females, which is kind of the maddening part of the project. I actually have Coral Glows and bananas in my collection here, and both of them are male makers. So, you know, I've been breeding for years, producing dozens and dozens, mainly of Coral Glows because I've had the Coral Glow longer, and I have yet to have one single female from that male maker Coral Glow, which is kind of the maddening part of the project. And both genes is kind of interesting. They both go through a big transformation as they age and mature. So you can actually tell that this one right here, this is definitely a hatchling Coral Glow. You can definitely tell because it has a lot of oranges, and a lot of times in the hatchlings you'll see like almost like a purple lavender color for the background. And as they age and mature, they pretty much lose a lot of the purple and the orange. They turn into kind of a two-tone yellow. Some of the yellow is more orange than yellow, but it's mostly a two-tone yellow. And a lot of times they'll actually develop a lot of freckling all over the snake as they age and mature, which is kind of interesting. So here is the GHI. The GHI is pretty interesting too. I don't have GHI in my collection. It's actually a dark gene. Works really well with a lot of combinations to darken the background of the combinations, and it really jumbles up the pattern. Look at how much the GHI really jumbles up the pattern and really darkens the background. So here's what happens if you take the GHI and you work it into the Coral Glow. Take a look at this. This is a pretty interesting combination. It almost looks like a jumbled up Coral Glow with a darkened background, almost like a chocolatey orange background, which is a pretty interesting effect. This one actually has a little paradoxing right here. Sometimes you actually get paradoxing on some of your Coral Glows. I've kind of had it randomly through my collection where you just get a little bit of black that's unexpected, just kind of breaking through the pattern that is, most of the time, it's not reproducible. If you actually took this and bred it to something, you really couldn't reproduce the paradoxing, but it always makes your snake kind of unique to have a little bit of paradoxing in it. It's a pretty awesome combination, and usually when I think of the GHI, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is the combination of the GHI and the Mojave. So take a look at this. I actually pulled one up over here, and they actually had a combination over here with the Mojave working it into the Coral Reef, which is a pretty interesting combination. And the Mojave is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. If you actually breed it to to other snakes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex and get two genes, a lot of times you'll get an all-white snake with blue eyes, or in the case of like the mystics and the phantoms, you'll end up with purple snakes and you get your purple passions and your mystic potions. It's a pretty awesome gene. And I'd say normally when people look at the Mojaves, they don't really think of it as a dark gene per se. They usually think of it as in the blue-eyed leucistic, but I'd say a lot of times if you add Mojave to combinations, it will significantly darken a lot of the background in a lot of your combinations. So I kind of wanted to show you this before we added the Mojave to the Coral Reef. This is the combination of the Mojave and the DJI, and it's kind of an interesting combination, unlike anything I've really seen before. As a matter of fact, when I first saw this, I thought maybe it was an allelic combination because it really changed the appearance. It doesn't really look anything like the Mojave or the DJI. And then after I dug into it a little bit further, I found out that this is not an allelic combination. So if you actually bred this to something else, you would get possibly get some normals, and you could reproduce this, which you couldn't otherwise do with an allelic combination. And I've actually seen some of these in person and in some videos. And let me tell you, you get some really dark Mojave DJIs with this really bright line down the top, and they don't even look real. They look like they're made of plastic or something. It's a pretty interesting combination between these two genes. So here's what happens if you take the Mojave and you work it into the Coral Reef. Take a look at this. It's a kind of a wild combination. Essentially what you get is you get like a DJI Mojave looking snake, and then the coral glow is so visually dominant that it transforms the color into a completely different color, almost like a burnt orange color as far as the background. That is a pretty wild combination. And I actually brought up one more exactly the same as this one. And this kind of blew me away. Take a look at this. This is another Mojave Coral Reef. So it's the Coral Glow Mojave DJI. And it's kind of interesting to see such a different visual appearance between these two. So this snake right here and this snake right here are exactly the same genes, which kind of blows me away, because usually when you think of the Coral Glow and the Mojave and the DJI, you don't really think that they could really have that much variability within the genes. Like, for example, if you actually had like the black pastel or the cinnamon, those two genes can be extremely variable, and then when you make combinations with different versions of those genes, you can have significantly different visual effects. And in this case, it looks like it's one of these. I'd say probably the Mojave is a little bit more variable. Maybe the DJI is a little bit more variable. I wouldn't think the coral glows would be that variable from one example of the coral glow to the other to really transform, you know, from like a burnt orange all the way to this almost looks like a purplish blue-eyed leucistic kind of a color. Almost looks like a purple passion kind of a color, which is kind of interesting. So take a look at this. I thought this was pretty fascinating. You can actually take the same combination with the DJI Mojave Coral Glow and then add one more copy of the Coral Glow. And essentially what you get is you get kind of the same looking snake with, you add two copies of the Coral Glow, and it really jumbles up the pattern even more. It gives you this really interesting effect, almost like this purplish colored snake that's really wild, almost like a purplish gray or something. That thing is pretty wild. If you actually look at the prices of these aren't too outrageous. So this one actually is $800, which isn't too bad for a 4-gene combination. So all these genes have been around for a really long time, so they're not really super expensive like some of the genes that would be like thousands and thousands of dollars. So here's another interesting gene that they worked into the Coral Reef, and that is the Mystic. And the Mystic's kind of interesting too, because it's also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, and a lot of people consider it to be in the kind of a dark gene where it'll really darken a lot of your combinations. I'd say it darkens a lot more than the Mojave in a lot of your combinations. If you actually take the Mystic and work it into the Mojave, you get the Mystic Potion, which is a purplish colored snake, which is pretty wild. So here's what happens if you take the Mystic and you work it into the Coral Reef. Take a look at this snake. That is really wild. And this almost reminds me of, as a matter of fact, you can actually take Ghost and work it into some dark genes. It almost looks like Orange Ghost into something like Blackhead or something like that. And a lot of times you'll actually get almost like a steel gray combination with the Ghost and the Blackhead. That's kind of what it reminded me at first. And it's kind of interesting. You can make almost a similar visual effect with the combination of the Coral Glow and then two dark genes. So the DJI and the Mystic are both dark genes, really darkening the Coral Glow. But in this case, you actually see quite a bit of color left over from the Coral Glow, which is a pretty amazing combination. I was wondering how much this one costs. That is $750, sold in 2020, which is a pretty amazing combination. So here's the last one I want to show you. This is actually just the Coral Glow DJI. This actually has yellow belly in the mix too. So essentially what this is the yellow belly Coral Reef, I guess you would call it. Now it's kind of interesting. This one had a little bit of weight on it, and you can actually see the freckles coming through as it ages and matures. You can kind of see it going through the transformation. And it's kind of interesting with the Coral Glow. There's certain genes that you can work in with the Coral Glow to enhance the amount of freckling as it ages and matures. I'm pretty sure the black pastel will actually enhance the freckling. Well, I've seen quite a bit of black pastel Coral Glows and black pastel bananas as adults that have an insane amount of freckling in the patterns. It's pretty wild. If you actually come over here on Morph Market and look at some of the oldest Coral Glows and bananas and look at the genes that are in the mix with a lot of those, you can actually kind of get a handle on which ones enhance the amount of freckling and which ones will reduce the amount of freckling. And pretty much across the board, as far as what I've seen, as far as reducing the freckling, I'm pretty sure that the Enchi will actually reduce the freckling. As a matter of fact, I actually have a banana Enchi clown, and the combination of those three genes, I think it's the combination of the banana and the Enchi that pretty much eliminates all the freckling, all the spots as it ages and matures. It's coming up on about almost 2 years old, and I think it only has 2 little freckles on the whole snake, which is a pretty amazing effect between the Enchi and the banana. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Paul McNicholas asks, how do you keep your ball pythons from escaping your rack system? And that is a very good question. So if you actually look at the racks right behind me, these racks are made by ARS Caging. And essentially the way it works is these racks are, they kind of have a steel frame with a plastic tub that slides in and out of the rack. And in the back of the tub, there's actually a metal heat strip on the bottom. And then in the front of the tub, they actually have a drink holder that's built in where you can actually put disposable deli cups in the drink holder. Let me tell you, it's pretty convenient. You can hold a lot of ball pythons in a small space. And I always wondered when I first started in ball pythons if the snakes could potentially open up the tub, somehow get inside and leverage against the drink holder and maybe the top of the tub and squeeze in there and push the tubs open. And let me tell you, I've been breeding ball pythons for about 5 or 6 years with these racks, and I have yet to have one ball python or any type of snake figure out how to open one of those tubs. And it's kind of interesting if you look back at the beginning of ball pythons, I've actually seen a lot of the original racks with a locking system on the rack so the snake couldn't potentially open up the tub. But I think they realized after a while that there's no way that the ball python or any kind of a snake can actually open up the tub. Hopefully, I've never actually seen it so far. I've never heard of it as being a problem. And I'm sure if it was a problem, if we even had one snake escape from a rack, I'm sure they would redesign the racks with some kind of a lock on the tubs, but I don't think it's a problem. I've never heard of it, and I've never experienced any snake escaping from any tub. Of course, sometimes they'll escape, but it's always my fault where I accidentally open up the tub and then I'll get distracted on something else and I'll look back and the snake will be gone. It's like, where's the snake? The snake has escaped. Or I've actually seen, in one case, I did lose a snake where I put a really super tiny king snake, smaller than the thickness of a pencil. It was really super skinny, and I put that snake in one of these ARS 70 series tubs, a really big tub, and the tub actually had a gap between the top of the tub and the rack system. It was not designed for a hatchling king snake, and that snake actually squeezed out between the tub and the frame of the rack and escaped, and I never found that snake. I don't know what happened to it. We searched for that snake for months before he gave up, and it's been a couple of years since I lost that snake somewhere here in the house. It's kind of crazy. But other than that, I've never had a ball python or any adult snake, even a hatchling or anything like that. No snake has ever escaped from these rack systems. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.